It began with a strange hum, low and steady, picked up by deep space monitoring stations in Antarctica and the far side of the moon. At first, scientists thought it was just background radiation or a frequency bounce from a distant star, but then the pattern repeated every 9 minutes, a pulse, clean and sharp, not natural, not random. Inside the Global Observation Center in Geneva, analysts gathered quickly as lines of alien symbols appeared on their screens, moving like a marching code. Panic didn't come all at once, it came slowly, like a shadow crawling over a map. Military commanders, linguists, and artificial intelligence systems worked day and night, decoding the message. What they found chilled them. It was a countdown. No demand, no conversation, just a ticking clock, counting down to something no one could name. And then, just 6 days later, the sky changed. A tear opened near the orbit of Neptune, not like a wormhole in movies, but a shimmering ripple, like a wound in the fabric of space. Through it came the ships black, massive, silent. Hundreds of them. Some looked like flying spears, others like massive disks with glowing blue lights underneath. They didn't respond to radio calls. They didn't answer diplomatic messages. They just moved in perfect formation, closing the distance to Earth with chilling precision. At first, people thought it might be a mistake, or perhaps a peaceful mission gone wrong, but hope faded when the first signal came through. It was a voice calm, emotionless, cold. It spoke in English, Russian, Mandarin, Arabic, and 50 other languages at once, saying the same line again and again, submit or be erased. The message repeated every hour, across all frequencies, even hijacking television signals and smart devices. It was no longer a mystery, it was a threat. And it came from the Dominion, an alien empire that Earth had never heard of, but would soon never forget. They had crushed 100 worlds before reaching here. They saw Earth as just another rock, another name to erase. But what they didn't know was that humanity was not like their previous enemies. While governments struggled to react, Earth's defense networks went into quiet motion. Above the clouds, the Earth Orbital Defense Station Aegis came alive, powered by old Cold War satellites, railgun platforms, and space mines buried in orbital paths. Commander Ryako Shaw stood at the edge of Aegis's observation deck, watching the incoming swarm of alien vessels, her heart steady but her mind racing. She had trained her whole life for space threats, but this was different. These weren't asteroids or rogue drones. This was a war fleet, and it was not bluffing. On Earth, the United Nations called an emergency session, but by the time delegates finished their speeches, the countdown had reached 0. A sudden tremor shook the moon as one of its research colonies lost contact. Then the sky above Tokyo turned red with energy trails as a Dominion scout ship flew overhead, not firing, just watching. The invasion hadn't begun, but it had already started breaking Earth's nerves. People panicked. Cities emptied. Military bases locked down. But somewhere in the chaos, something else began to grow resolve. Humanity had always been divided by language, by borders, by politics. But now, with a common enemy visible in the sky, something ancient stirred deep within. Across continents, soldiers from different nations stood side by side. Hackers, engineers, and scientists formed underground teams to study the alien transmissions. Young students left school to volunteer for defense units. Factories once shut by automation reopened to build weapons and supplies. Even old rivalries between countries began to fade, replaced by the urgency of survival. Earth was not giving up. The aliens had made a critical mistake. They thought their message would make Earth surrender, but it did the opposite. It woke up something fierce, something wild. In the command chamber of Aegis, Shaw received her orders: delay the enemy, no matter the cost. She looked out again at the sky, where the black dots of enemy ships had now grown larger, close enough to reflect the sun. There was no backup coming from the stars. There were no allies out there. Earth was alone. But Shaw smiled, not because she was fearless, but because she knew what the aliens didn't. Humanity was unpredictable, dangerous, and full of tricks. The Dominion expected fear. What they were going to get was fire. As Aegis prepared to launch its first kinetic rod, an old weapon known as the God Spear, a tungsten rod dropped from orbit with the force of a nuclear strike, technicians locked in coordinates on the nearest alien cruiser. Shaw gave the order. The rod fell silently, invisible to radar, and when it struck, the alien ship exploded in a silent bloom of flame, metal, and debris. One ship down. Hundreds to go. But it didn't matter. The first blow had been struck, not by a superior force, but by a determined one. And somewhere deep in the Dominion's fleet, a commander narrowed his eyes as he realized this planet was not going to be easy. The countdown was over. The war for Earth had begun. Smoke still hung in Earth's upper atmosphere, drifting from the shattered remains of the Dominion cruiser that had been torn apart by the kinetic strike, and while many celebrated the small victory, deep down, they all knew this was only the beginning. The fleet had paused not out of fear, but surprise. They had never seen a primitive world strike first, never seen resistance this early, and for a few hours Earth had peace, but it was the kind of silence before a storm. In underground bunkers, war rooms buzzed with hurried voices and glowing digital maps, showing red dots moving closer, marking the alien fleet's position. General Marcus Leung stood at the center of Earth's Unified Defense Council, a former strategist known for unconventional thinking, now chosen to lead what many feared was a doomed fight. But he didn't see it that way. He saw it as history's sharp turn, where humanity either vanished or became something the universe would remember forever. Leung knew Earth couldn't match the enemy ship for ship, so he didn't try. Instead, he turned to chaos, using Earth's unpredictability as its greatest weapon. Orders were given not to fight the aliens directly, but to confuse them, mislead them, and bleed them one ship at a time. Old satellites were reprogrammed into mobile EMP mines, nuclear subs resurfaced to launch stealth drones, and civilian aircraft hangars were converted into launch zones for prototype fighters. Engineers worked without sleep, hackers attacked the alien signal network, and every university with a physics department was now part of the war effort. In the skies, the enemy began moving again, launching observation probes and small fire tests, measuring Earth's defenses, but every time they reached too low, they vanished, hit by railgun satellites or trapped by magnetic nets floating in orbit. On the ground, people adjusted fast. Cities near coasts were evacuated, civilians were sent to underground shelters, and in the silence that followed, Earth's military spread out like a hidden web. In Alaska, snipers waited with rail-assisted rifles. In Mongolia, camouflage tanks buried themselves beneath sand and stone. There was no single base, no central command the Dominion could destroy, only thousands of scattered, hidden threats ready to strike. Commander Reiko Shaw, still aboard Aegis, now served as Earth's eyes, reporting on every movement from above, feeding data into AI prediction systems that helped anticipate alien strategy. The Dominion, thinking Earth would panic and collapse, instead found a world growing more focused by the day. For every city they struck, Earth struck back tenfold. In the South Pacific, a Dominion drone ship was dragged beneath the ocean by a trap planted by a deep-sea mining crew. In orbit, a shuttle full of human engineers crash-landed onto a damaged alien destroyer, boarded it using blowtorches, and rerouted its controls back toward the fleet before detonating its power core. They were not soldiers, but they fought like devils. It wasn't always victory. Many died. Bases were lost, families separated, but every loss made the resistance stronger. Word of Earth's stand began to spread. Messages were picked up by strange frequencies, stories of rebellion against the Dominion that had not been heard in ages. Somewhere out there, someone was listening. But on Earth, survival came first. In a hidden facility beneath the Alps, Earth's best minds were decoding alien tech, reverse engineering weapons, learning their weaknesses. It was discovered that Dominion ships used a living crystal to power their energy fields. Once damaged, they became unstable. That knowledge was passed on to every defense cell on Earth. In Lagos, a group of teenagers used it to disable a scout drone using a hacked microwave tower. The aliens may have had the power, but humans had imagination, and that made all the difference. Meanwhile, Dominion commanders grew frustrated. Their scans showed Earth's military strength should have been crushed by now, yet every strike met a counterstrike. They tried jamming communications, but human couriers used old radios and handwritten signals. They tried targeting infrastructure, but solar grids, wind farms, and independent generators kept power flowing. Every move they made, Earth adapted. General Leung watched it all unfold from his mobile command base hidden in Siberia. He didn't need to win every battle, he only needed to make the aliens bleed, to show them that Earth wasn't easy prey. He approved the next wave of operations, stealth missions to capture alien tech, misinformation campaigns to confuse their AI, and coordinated traps using Earth's terrain as a weapon. Snow, jungle, desert, every environment became a battlefield. In the Amazon, a Dominion scout force vanished without a trace, taken down by local fighters using ropes, arrows, and fire. In orbit, a Dominion battleship began to spin, drifting helplessly after being hit by a swarm of magnetized mines disguised as debris. Rico Shaw watched it all and felt something stirring deep in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something stronger. Pride. This was Earth-scarred, broken, wild but unyielding. She knew the Dominion would soon send their full force, that the worst was yet to come, but for now, Earth had held. And in the heart of every city, behind every closed door, people began to believe not that they would survive, but that they could win. Across the stars, the Dominion had always expected resistance. They had prepared for armies, fleets, and negotiations. What they had not prepared for was humanity, messy, brilliant, stubborn humanity that refused to surrender, that turned every weakness into strength. They expected Earth to fall in a day. It had been a week, and the sky was still full of fire. The Dominion had sent warnings, fired their first shots, and lost their first ships, but they still believed Earth would eventually break. To them, humans were a backward species on an unimportant planet, using outdated weapons and emotional instincts to fight against a power they couldn't understand. But arrogance has a price, and now the price was being paid with fire and wreckage. On the dark side of the moon, where Dominion outposts had quietly started to build a forward station, a sudden quake ripped through their landing bay, not from tectonic movement, but from a massive underground explosion, triggered by Earth's tunneling units that had silently dug into the rock weeks before. The blast turned their base into rubble and left only static on their comms. At the same time, over the Atlantic Ocean, an alien carrier descending for a low-altitude scan was struck by 3 stealth submarines rising from the deep, their torpedoes not just mechanical but loaded with stolen Dominion tech, converted by Earth's engineers into piercing energy spikes that shattered the ship's belly. Flaming debris fell into the ocean, and for the first time since the invasion began, the enemy fleet started to adjust formation not to attack, but to defend. Inside one of the Dominion warships, Commander Carvel paced with narrowed eyes, staring at glowing holographic maps filled with red marks where ships had gone silent. He had studied 100 species, conquered dozens of planets, but never had he seen a species this unpredictable. Their weapons should have been weak, their tactics chaotic, but the humans weren't fighting with just machines. They were using strategy, misdirection, and fury. They used sound tricks to confuse targeting systems, false broadcasts to lure ships into traps, and hacked drones that played innocent until it was too late. And most terrifying of all, they learned fast. Every time the Dominion changed its codes, humans cracked them. Every time a new scanner was deployed, it was blinded within hours. They had underestimated Earth, and now it was costing them not just ships, but control. In the ruined skyline of what had once been part of Shanghai, a Dominion landing squad attempted to secure the area, unaware that every movement they made was being watched by street-level resistance teams. These weren't trained soldiers, they were construction workers, medics, students, but they had learned where to strike. In under 7 minutes, the squad was ambushed and overwhelmed. No survivors. And the equipment they left behind was taken by a team of human engineers hiding in an old subway tunnel, already working to understand its secrets. Meanwhile, in the Andes Mountains, Earth's High Command had moved its central relay hub to a former observatory, its powerful telescopes now turned towards space, tracking enemy movements and decoding patterns in the stars. From there, General Leung coordinated Earth's hidden armies, not through force, but through speed, launching dozens of rapid attacks, disappearing before the enemy could respond. He called it the Hornet strategy: hit fast, vanish, sting again. Commander Shaw aboard Eggeiss helped guide long-range strikes, and the once peaceful station now bristled with modified weapons scavenged from fallen alien ships. Still, the Dominion refused to retreat. Believing pride was stronger than logic, they began deploying heavier weapons, plasma storms that boiled the surface of forests, beams that cut through buildings like glass, and hunter drones that sniffed out heat and sound. Entire neighborhoods were lost in minutes. But even in the smoke, resistance didn't stop. In one powerful moment, a fleet of Dominion drones chased a group of fleeing civilians across a canyon in Colorado, only to find that the bridge had been lined with remote explosives, triggered not by any military leader, but by an old man in a wheelchair who stayed behind to protect his town. He smiled before he pressed the button. The explosion took out the bridge, the drones, and him. Across Earth, similar sacrifices became stories, and those stories became fuel. Each act of courage was a warning to the Dominion. Earth would not be taken without a fight that burned the sky. Inside one damaged alien cruiser that crash-landed in Iceland, a human strike team led by Captain Mira Holt boarded through a breach in the hull. The team wore armor made from Earth steel and Dominion plating, moved with perfect coordination, and didn't speak unless needed. They had one goal: recover the Dominion ship core and energy source that could turn the tide of the war. Fighting through smoke and enemy resistance, they reached the core and extracted it. Holt was wounded, 2 soldiers lost, but the mission was a success. The core was delivered to the tech labs hidden beneath New Delhi, where human scientists started building Earth's first hybrid war engine. In space, the Dominion fleet continued to lose control. Earth's junk, once floating uselessly in orbit, had been turned into trapped solar panels, turned into mirrors that blinded sensors, old rocket parts rigged with explosives, and satellites transmitting fake troop locations. The Dominion's AI began to fail, unable to tell what was real and what was bait. Their war plan, so perfect on paper, now looked like chaos. Even their morale was breaking. Captured transmissions revealed cracks, alien commanders arguing, some refusing orders, others asking permission to retreat. But the Dominion hierarchy allowed no surrender. They had built their empire on fear, and to back down would mean weakness. So they stayed, even as they bled. What they didn't know was that Earth's greatest weapon hadn't even been used yet. Deep under the Arctic ice, a special project known only as Whisper Protocol was being finalized. The plan was simple but bold: hijack one of the enemy's command ships, fly it straight back through the wormhole, and detonate it inside the Dominion's own staging area. It was a suicide mission, but there were already hundreds of volunteers. Earth was not only surviving, it was planning revenge. Rico Shaw stood before the viewing glass of Aegis, watching the stars as more enemy ships moved into formation. She didn't flinch. They had lost cities, lost lives, but they hadn't lost the war. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The cost of underestimating Earth was now plain. The Dominion came expecting surrender. Instead, they had awakened something ancient, wild, and impossible to tame. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time. For weeks, Earth had stood on the edge of destruction, surrounded by a fleet that had crushed entire civilizations, but now something had changed in the rhythm of the war, like a beat shifting in the middle of a battle song, and for the first time since the invasion began, the aliens were not longer advancing, they were reacting. Their ships began to tighten formation, their scouts stopped entering the atmosphere freely, and their plasma strikes slowed, not from mercy, but from confusion. The Dominion had never faced this kind of resistance before, not from a civilization this young, this raw, and this bold. Earth had become a storm of defiance, hitting from every direction with a fire that couldn't be measured by technology or logic. In the Arctic, where the frozen winds howled over the dark ice, the Whisper Protocol was no longer a rumor, it had become a fully armed mission, ready to launch. Inside a black hangar buried beneath the ice, an alien command ship stolen during a raid and patched together with both human steel and Dominion metal stood like a ghost, humming with stolen power. The ship, now renamed the Ghost of Earth, was the first of its kind, not fully human, not fully alien, but something new. Commander Reiko Shaw had been chosen to lead it, not because she was the highest ranking, but because she had survived more battles than any other orbital officer and understood the enemy better than anyone alive. As her team suited up, engineers handed her the final control crystal, a small pulsing shard taken from a Dominion core, unstable and deadly, meant to overload the ship's core once it reached the other side of the wormhole. It was a one-way mission. She accepted it without hesitation. Meanwhile, down on Earth, the Resistance had become something even the Dominion's data could not explain. Cities once thought lost had been retaken by guerrilla fighters using rooftops as runways and sewer tunnels as highways. In the jungles of Indonesia, human fighters had lured Dominion ground troops into old temples rigged with explosives. In France, a young woman with a hacked alien rifle took down a Dominion officer, sparking a revolt that spread through an entire region. The Resistance was no longer scattered. It was unified, guided by a communication network hidden in satellite shadows, known as the Ember Line, operated by former internet hackers who used abandoned school buildings as command centers. Messages flowed through secure channels, coded in languages mixed from ancient human dialects and fake memes, and while the Dominion tried to intercept them, they could never translate the humor, the rage, or the fire behind those words. In space, the Dominion's outer fleet had started collapsing. A series of coordinated strikes led by Earth's stealth drones took out two massive cruisers over the Pacific Rim, sending debris crashing into the ocean with sonic booms that shattered windows for miles. And yet, the people cheered. They no longer feared the sky, they watched it, tracked it, and struck back. Scientists in Geneva and Cairo had finally completed reverse engineering Dominion shielding tech and began outfitting prototype human aircraft with light armor that could deflect plasma for brief moments. These new ships, called Skyrunners, were fast, sharp, and piloted by the best young minds from every continent. They flew in silence and struck with precision, darting between enemy lines like wasps. In one daring raid, a squadron of Skyrunners destroyed a Dominion fuel ship, igniting a chain reaction that burned through 3 enemy vessels docked beside it. The explosion lit up the night sky, and across the planet, people watched and whispered a single word: hope. But it wasn't just about surviving anymore. Earth was preparing to end this war. The Dominion's weakness wasn't just technological. It was their pride, their refusal to adapt, to see humans as equals. And that pride made them predictable. Leung, from his mobile war room deep in the Sahara, had created a master plan, a coordinated global assault that would cripple the heart of the Dominion fleet. But it needed one key move to work. The Ghost of Earth had to break through the wormhole and destroy the alien command station on the other side, cutting off the Dominion's reinforcements and leaving their fleet stranded above a planet they no longer controlled. Reiko Shaw's mission had to succeed, or everything would fall apart. As her ship rose from the icy hangar and disappeared into the cold sky, the planet below held its breath. She flew alone at first, using stolen Dominion codes to bypass scanners, silent and invisible among the stars. But the enemy saw her too late. By the time their ships turned to intercept, she had already reached the breach. The wormhole swirled before her like a living storm. Behind her, alarms rang and red lights lit up her cockpit. Enemy fighters swarmed, but she pushed the engines beyond limit. The ship screamed under the pressure, the hull trembled, and sparks flew from the control panel, but it held. She entered the wormhole. On Earth, the Ember Line went quiet, everyone watching the signal flicker and vanish. For 5 long minutes, nothing. No sound. No data. Just silence. And then a shockwave. The wormhole pulsed once, twice, and collapsed in on itself with a flash brighter than the sun. The Dominion reinforcements were gone. Their gateway was destroyed. Cheers erupted across bunkers and shelters, in cities and forests, in labs and ruins. People cried, screamed, held each other. They had not just survived, they had turned the tide. With their command station gone, Dominion forces lost coordination. Orders failed. Ships began to drift, and confusion spread through the fleet. General Leung launched the final phase Operation Sundown, and Earth's united armies rose like thunder. The resistance, the military, the scientists, the civilians, they all moved together. The sky lit up with battle, but this time, Earth was the one striking with full power. Enemy ships fell one by one, and for the first time in history, humanity pushed an empire backward. The war was not yet over, but its end had finally begun. The skies above Earth were no longer filled with fire, but with silence, the kind of silence that follows a storm so violent it reshapes the ground it touched. The Dominion fleet, once the most feared force in the galaxy, now floated broken and scattered across low orbit like shattered teeth, their flagship reduced to drifting metal, powerless, unable to communicate with whatever remained of their command beyond the stars. Earth, scarred but unbowed, stood not just free, but victorious, and the galaxy would remember it. In bunkers, labs, and ruined cities, people began to emerge into the light, not as survivors, but as something else, witnesses to humanity's greatest war, and proof that even the most advanced empire could bleed. In the Andes relay station, General Lung stood before a global transmission, not in uniform, but in the worn jacket he had worn since the first day of the invasion, his voice steady, not angry, not triumphant, but firm, as he addressed not just Earth, but every listening ship in orbit. He gave the Dominion a choice: surrender and leave peacefully, or stay and be erased. No threats, no shouting, just certainty. That message echoed through every frequency, translated into the Dominion's own language, and bounced across space by human satellites that had once been used for weather reports. The Dominion's remaining captains hesitated, confused. Their war computers were offline, their leadership severed, and their soldiers demoralized after weeks of failure. One by one, Dominion ships began to send surrender codes, their lights dimming, their weapons ejecting from bays, and their engines powering down. It wasn't just defeat, it was humiliation, the kind that would live in their history forever. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had not only survived, they had broken the cycle. Across the galaxy, other species who had lived under Dominion rule listened in secret, their screens flashing with Earth's defiance, and for the first time in centuries, hope spread among the stars. The idea that someone, anyone, had stood up and won lit sparks in distant corners of space. Some alien resistance groups began sending encoded signals to Earth, requesting contact, advice, and aid not to rule, but to rise. And Earth responded, not with pride, but with purpose. Their engineers began broadcasting open-source files designs for shield-breaking weapons, tricks for hacking Dominion code, lessons learned during the war all freely given. No demands, no politics, just shared strength. Earth became the symbol of resistance, and their victory turned into a blueprint for rebellion. But they didn't forget the cost. In a memorial built in the ruins of what had once been Berlin's Central Square, names were carved not into stone, but into recycled plating from downed Dominion ships. Every civilian who had died, every soldier lost, every resistance member who had vanished in the fight was remembered there, their stories recorded and shared across the Ember Line. Rico Shaw's name stood at the very top, her mission now legend, her sacrifice the blow that shattered the Dominion's reach. Even alien prisoners held in Earth's care were shown those records not to mock them, but to show them that this was not just victory through war, but through unity, sacrifice, and belief. Earth had no intention of becoming what it had just destroyed. Instead of building an empire, they built alliances. Instead of installing fear, they offered warning. The Dominion, now broken and retreating to the far edge of known space, sent envoys requesting peace. The first diplomatic meeting took place in low orbit, aboard the Aegis, now fully repaired and flying Earth's new flag, a white starburst over black, symbolizing light from darkness. General Leung, backed by leaders from every continent, faced the Dominion's ambassador, who still spoke with the cold voice of superiority but with none of its power. Earth made no demands for resources, no claims over conquered territory. They asked for one thing only, that what happened here be remembered. That the stars remember this planet, this people, and the price of assuming weakness where there is strength of heart. That if any future empire ever thinks to bring chains to Earth again, they first study what became of the last one. And so the terms were signed, not in celebration, but in silent recognition of the shift. The Dominion was allowed to retreat, with the agreement they would never again approach Earth or any of its allies. The wormhole gate remained closed, sealed by Earth's own tech, and guarded by unmanned satellites that watched in every direction. Humanity didn't seek revenge, but they would never allow another invasion. Back on the ground, as cities began rebuilding and skies cleared, a new age began. Not one of peace born from submission, but peace earned through fire. The technology salvaged from the war brought rapid change. Energy crises ended. Diseases were cured. Old borders faded. Earth, once divided by fear and greed, had united in pain and risen with purpose. Young children read about the invasion, not in fear, but with pride, knowing they were born in the time after, in a world that had faced the worst and come through unbroken. And in the deep black beyond the stars, whispers continued to spread. Alien travelers, pirates, smugglers, and even soldiers spoke of Earth not just as a planet, but as a legend, a place where an empire was brought low. A world where humans made an example so sharp, so clear, that even now it echoed in every Dominion command center, every war room, every planning board. They called it the Earth lesson. And that lesson was simple. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never mistake chaos for lack of control. Never underestimate a species just because their world looks fragile. Because when Earth stood on the edge of extinction, they didn't break. They became the example.